Greetings and welcome to the video on graphing on the coordinate plane. So this problem we are going to be using one of the questions from the review to help us look at this idea and to practice this skill. And so with this problem, we're basically applying a lot of the knowledge we've learned with algebraic expressions with what we know about plotting points so we can visualize the relationship between two quantities. So in this problem, we have a truck that uses a gallon of diesel for every 6 miles traveled, and the relationship between the amount of diesel left in the tank is R, and the distance traveled is S miles. And that can be represented with this equation here. S equals 150 minus 6R. So, and this seems to make sense because if we have, this is the amount of diesel that is left over. I'm trying to think, like, we start out and we have our gas tank from full to empty. If we have a lot of diesel left, we've probably traveled a few miles because we haven't really used much of the diesel. But as the amount of diesel gets less, we're probably going to have traveled, we've driven some miles. And so we need to see what this is going to look like by graphing that relationship. Now, in part A, it tells us to fill in the table and then to graph the relationship. So we'll start out and we're going to fill in this table. Now, with our equation of S equals 150 minus 6R, we have two variables, S and R. And so the amount of diesel left is R and the distance traveled is S. Now, if I notice up here, we have some values that we can substitute for R. And when we plug those in, that's going to give us the distance traveled. So I'm going to rewrite these using substitution one at a time. So our distance is 150 minus 6 times 25. 6 times 25 is 150. And so our distance traveled is 150 minus 50, or 0. So if we have 25 gallons of diesel left, we've gone no miles. Now, if we look here, S equals 150 minus 6 times, let's plug in, let's substitute this 23. So 6 times 23, well, 6 times 20 is 120, and 6 times 3 is 18. So 120 plus 18 is 138. And so our distance traveled is 150 minus 138, or our distance is 12 miles. So we've traveled 12 miles. Now, I'm going to look here for a moment. They did tell us that this truck uses 1 gallon of diesel for every 6 miles traveled. And so I notice from 23 to 21, that is a total of 2 gallons. And so that must mean that those 2 gallons of diesel that are used is going to travel another 12 miles. So 2 gallons is going to be 6 times 2, or 12. So we would have traveled 24 miles. And I'm going to quick check this using substitution. Our distance is 150 minus 6 times 21. So our distance is 150 minus 6 times 21 is 126. And our distance is 24. Check it out. So that works. We're using 2 more gallons, so we're going to travel 12 more miles. We're using 2 more gallons, so we're going to travel 12 more miles. So now we have our table, and this is going to allow us to plot our points. Now they give us some information here, and on the test there's not going to be anything quite this complicated, but it is interesting to look at that the horizontal axis is the amount of diesel left over. And that's measured in gallons. And they tell us to start the horizontal axis at 17 gallons. So that means this is 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And then our vertical axis, the y-axis, is the distance traveled. And 1 unit represents 6 miles. So this is 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, 48, 54, 60, 66. I could probably stop there because our highest distance value is 48. So now that we have this, we have our coordinates. And because our diesel is on the x-axis, that means that r is our x coordinate. So really, our coordinates are going to be rs. So our x is r, our y is s. So if we go over 25, our distance traveled is 0. So we have a point right there. If we go over 23, our distance traveled is 12. So here's 23, here's 12. Our point is right there. Next, we are 21 and then 24. So here's 21, there's 24, there's our point. Next, we have 19 and 36. So here's 36, there's 19, so there's our point. And then 17 and 48 are right here. So we do have a straight line. And this straight line seems to make sense, like we discussed up here with our fuel gauge, that when there is only a little bit of fuel left, we've traveled more miles. When there's a lot of fuel left, meaning our tank is more full, we haven't traveled nearly as many miles. So I think there's a missing question here. What if there were like 22 miles? So if we wanted, or 22 gallons. So what if there were 22 gallons of diesel left over? That would be, let's see, 22. Looks like it would be about 18 miles. Now we could check and see if we do S equals 150 minus 6 times 22, and S equals 150 minus, well, 6 times 20 is 120. 6 times 2 is 12, so that's 132. And our distance is 18 miles. So we could use our graph to plot that, to check that there, and we could use our equation to solve that as well. The number one thing you need to remember when solving problems like this is if they give you an equation and they give you some values in the table, you can use substitution to get your points that you can then plot. So this is question 19. I don't have question 18 here, but if you want to check out question number 18 from the review, or you could check out the try from our today's lesson, which was the March 20th, chapter 9 review. Those would also get you some more practice problems.